You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a podcast supported by listeners like you. To contribute, visit patreon.com/I Have Some Notes.
Hey Liam, I have a pitch. What if we combine the camp and kineticism from Power Rangers with the badassery of speed bikes?
Sounds promising. What cool animal power does the hero have? Wolf? Shark? Komodo dragon?
Grasshopper.
I have some notes. Welcome, everyone, to I Have Some Notes, the movie podcast with cuts, keeps, punch-ups, and tweaks on mediocre movies. I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
And I am Greg Beaver.
And today we are discussing Shin Kamen Rider from 2023, a Japanese superhero action movie. Giving it the full I Have Some Notes treatment. It's not struck work so we can discuss it because it was made in another country that's not America.
Indeed. Now, I'm sure I say this like every other episode, but I'm under the weather again, and so I apologize up front for my voice being wrecked. I have two small children in the house. It's been a stressful couple weeks because we've been in the middle of a move, and suffice to say, I've caught whatever crud is in the air, and so this is my voice for this episode. Deal with it.
I thought it was because you were so excited you were watching this film, you just had to jump up and make Japanese shouting sounds.
Oh, no,
as you transformed. You just screamed yourself hoarse as you transformed.
Yes, that as well. I mean, that didn't help. I was sick and also screaming like joyful expletives at my television.
Rider kick! Yeah.
Perfect.
Speaking of writers' kicks, we get a kick out of you following us on social media. So right off the top, we do want to remind you that you can follow us at I Have Some Notes Pod on Instagram. I Have Some Notes on Facebook. X as well. That's our classic one. I feel weird about it, but we're still there. We're
for now.
We're riding this one out for now.
If you've made the switch over to Blue Sky, yeah.
Oh, are we on Blue Sky too? We got a link tree. That's why they made Linktree, so I don't have to do this. But honestly, the most important thing you could do would be just tell a friend right to their face about what we're doing here. Because word of mouth is just a great way to spread the word, let people know. So if you've got a film nerd in your life who you think would get a kick out of this, just send them a link about it. Why not?
Yeah, we'd super appreciate it.
But yeah, Shin Kamen Rider. I'm glad I suggested this one. I'm even more glad you guys took me up on it. Cause this, I mean, it checks all the boxes. We wanted to kick off our season with a superhero action movie from recent times. This was a 2023 release. This is this year this thing got made. And it's technically the same thing as a Marvel movie.
I'd be lying if I wasn't 20 minutes in cursing Liam's name.
But then,
yeah, it got better. Like I completely recognize that like something like Shin Kamen Rider was not made for me. Like I'm not the target audience. I'm not steeped in the culture that made like tokusatsu a beloved genre. And I also recognize that the film is making assumptions about your familiarity with the characters and story, and that fans of Kamen Rider might appreciate those shortcuts. I get like, it's not really any different than like the Tom Holland Spider-Man's just, hand waving Uncle Ben, just assuming that everybody knows who Uncle Ben is, right?
Yeah.
But regrettably, I can only evaluate the film that was presented.
That's fair.
In front of me.
Yeah.
And like what I was presented with was a 90-minute speed run of a television series.
Yeah, we were kind of discussing this a little bit in the chat and then a little bit before we recorded. This movie feels like a season and a half to 2 seasons of television condensed into 2 hours. And it is breakneck speed because of that. Like he fights his way through like an entire squad of mini bosses in this 2-hour movie. In this shockingly violent 2-hour movie. Like, for something that has the aesthetics of a Power Rangers episode, there are gallons of blood in this movie.
Yeah. I don't know if either of you've seen Guyver, but I was kind of getting Guyver vibes, and that, like, Guyver is like an ultra violent anime.
Yeah.
That he actually has kind of like a similar mask, big sort of like bug eyes. He's got a single antenna thing coming out. I think it's a blade, not really an antenna, but yeah, he just pulverizes his enemies into pulp, and that's this particularly in the opening scene of this movie. That's where I was thinking.
Yeah, it kind of comes and goes. Like, there's a lot of violence early on, and then it gets silly, and then it gets super bloody and violent again.
I did actually eventually settle in to the movie, which is funny because I watched this movie in so many different shifts. Like, I must have stopped it 3 times. Like, not for any particular reason other than just, like, I had other things to do, and I was just, like, trying to get the movie watched too when I had a chance. But I also, like, at one point I was falling asleep and I was like, oh, that's no good. So I had to, like, stop it and, like, wait for myself to be a little bit more conscious to watch it again. So, but I feel like there's a certain plot point, I guess, that we'll hit later where something happens and it actually creates, like, a proper stakes and
that's a good way to put
like
it.
An arc.
Proper
stakes. Yeah. Whereas before it's just like running to the location, having a fight, or run to that location, having a fight.
Yeah, it's definitely deliberately aping that old TV show. I think that's the thing I liked the most about it, was the way it was clearly this labor of love. And you're correct in saying like you could only evaluate the movie that was presented to you. I was so taken by this movie's bizarre charm, but also kind of like off-puttingness. Like I didn't watch it in shifts, but I did pause halfway to like go get a snack and like catch a breath and come back. That I'm like, I needed context, and I've kind of been on a Kamen Rider lore binge for the last week because I like couldn't just watch this and be like, okay, sure. I'm like, I need some context, please. And it definitely made me appreciate the movie a lot more. Not just knowing the cultural significance of Kamen Rider, Masked Rider, specifically, but also the impetus to make this film in 2023 in particular. And that's just one thing I want to highlight before we maybe get into some of the. Actually, let's do the details, the plot summary, what have you, and then we'll get into those. Why does this film exist? Discussions, but
into the fun facts.
Yeah, fun facts. So to start with the details, Shin Kamen Rider, directed by Hideki. Scott, can you say it? I'm sorry.
Hideaki Anno.
Hideaki Anno, written by Hideaki Anno and Shotaro Ishinomori. And I practiced really hard on some of the cast, but I'm going to tell you folks, I'm just going to spare us all. The cast is all a bunch of very talented, attractive Japanese actors. They're in this movie. You don't know their names. I could say any Japanese names. You'd have to believe me. So instead of you guys listening to me butcher these, Google it. Or watch the movie yourself. It is on Amazon Prime. So, 4 great actors are listed in our notes, and they have names that I can't pronounce. But they're in it. Those guys. Scott?
ショッカーに生まれし者はショッカーに帰る。それが筋よね。あなたも同じオーグメント。なのにこの幸せがなぜわからんのです。裏切りペアが必ず殺す。やはり人間は面白い。さあ、レッツパーティー。俺は俺なりのやり方で人類を救う。仮面ライダー第0号だ。あなたのプラン、魂の自由を取り戻して。あなたを信じてあなたに託す仮面ライダー本郷武さん
Takeshi Hongo is kidnapped by a sinister organization known as Shocker and transformed into a synthetic grasshopper-human hybrid. Before he can be brainwashed to do their evil bidding, Takeshi is freed by Ruriko Midorikawa, Her father, Dr. Midorikawa, created the grasshopper augment to fight and defeat the Shocker organization. But when Spider Og, a Shocker agent, kills him, Ruriko is stuck with a grasshopper dingus who's dubbed himself Kamen Rider to complete the mission. Are we going too fast? Hold on to your butts. What follows is essentially a Street Fighter tournament in which Takeshi and Ruriko travel from place to place, fighting multiple opponents in succession. Once the opponent eats a super kick, they're off to the next location for the next round. We discover the big bad is actually Ruriko's brother, who is a very scary butterfly, and he has his own Grasshopper Og ready to fight Takeshi. The two Kamen Riders fight, and Ruriko dies in the process, but not before installing a cheat code to defeat the butterfly in Takeshi's helmet. Now the Riders must unite to save the world, because the butterfly is going to destroy it. Did we miss that part? Sorry, there's a lot going on here. Yeah, we skipped over like a fight with a wasp lady who's trying to enslave the world, and like 3 different assassins who come after them. Like there's the government agents who have enlisted them to help take down this organization. The robot guy who's just around. Like it's there's stuff going on in this movie.
The second act of this movie is structured like the second act of Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where he's just like rapidly banging out bad guys.
Kinda, yeah. It when I said that it felt like several seasons of television, it's because like the climax with Waspog feels like it could be the end of an entire arc of like a television series, and then the climax with Butterfly Og feels like it could be the climax of an entire arc of a television series. And it's just like, Wasp was halfway through the movie, you guys. Like, holy crap.
Which is wild, because it's actually, each one of these villains is a homage to villains that appeared in the first 13 episodes of the show.
Yeah.
So they're not season villains, they're Monster of the Week villains.
Yeah,
because I think why there's that rapid fire succession through them.
Because the original Kamen Rider show is very much in the vein of a Power Rangers. You mentioned it off the top, in which it is like very like broad action, campy action, Sentai sort of stuff. And it's very Monster of the Week. There's an evil organization. They have a new monster this week. They're going to send it after Kamen Rider to try to kill him. Kamen Rider beats him up. That's the formula. But it's weird when it's condensed into a 2-hour film and you have so much going on. And the way that they developed, especially Wasp and Butterfly, they could have been their own movies, you guys. Like, I may be tiptoeing into some of my changes, but like, there are meaty plots there that get just like raced through.
just so we don't get emails, it's probably more accurate to say that that Power Rangers is an offshoot of Kamen Rider.
Yes, yeah. No, but I meant to imply that they're kind of they're in the same family tree.
Oh yeah, I knew what you meant. I just don't want to get the emails.
So word for it again, Greg.
Pardon?
So, what was the word for that genre again?
Hang on.
I
like,
just have to. It's Super Sentai stuff, isn't
it? Super Sentai's Power Rangers.
Tokusatsu.
Oh,
yeah. Okay, yeah.
Is the genre. And this, I didn't realize how much this one had kicked things off, and that's some of the context I got. So fun fact that I discovered, famously, so this movie was very much about those first 13 episodes, and kind of homaging those. In those first 13 episodes, they had a guy, he was the guy, he gets into a motorcycle accident early on, but they had already cooked in this other grasshopper guy, and it was just a natural fit, have this dude take over. So that's why there's 2 Kamen Riders even in this one. But the second guy they had didn't have a motorcycle license, so his transformation was on the first guy transformed into Kamen Rider while riding the bike. They couldn't do that because the guy didn't have a motorcycle license. So that is literally where we get the transformation poses. And like in our Discord chat, I'm dabbing and doing like Sailor Moon poses.
Yeah.
It starts at Kamen Rider for the most part. We have like Sailor Moon Magical Girl spinning around because that guy didn't have a motorcycle license.
Nice.
In 1971.
One guy, an actor didn't get a motorcycle license, and an entire genre.
An entire cliche, like a cliche, or trope, or what have you.
What's funny about that is like that one accident probably saved a bunch of Japanese animation studios tons of money because they could just reuse those animations and take up several minutes of their TV show every week.
And then, one of the other things I sort of learned reading about it is just like how deep this goes in terms of like people's love for it, especially people of a certain age, but also people of any age because it's been rebooted a million times. This Shin Godzilla is part of a big push. Like Shin Kamen Rider, part of a big push to sort of reinvent the genre, the tokusatsu genre. So the Shin Godzilla from 2016, highly recommend. Shin Ultraman, which I'm trying to get my hands on and want to watch it. And then this one made by, the director Anno, the Neon Genesis Evangelion guy. So like he's got cultural cred. Like this is a big deal. And the thing I was trying to think of something to liken it to that wasn't necessarily a Marvel or a DC thing. And the whole history of Kamen Rider has big Doctor Who vibes to me. Not necessarily in the subject matter, but in the terms of like, you can't find an artist from the UK, like a person who works in TV or film from the UK, who doesn't have like some affinity for Doctor Who. It's the same thing with Masked Rider, with Kamen Rider.
I buy that.
It's just like everyone's got their like their touchstone reference, but it never really got outside of Japan, kind of the same way Doctor Who's like way bigger in the UK. So
yeah, it definitely didn't get out of Japan the way some of its descendants did, like Power Rangers, which would be the one that everybody, I would say in North America, would be probably most familiar with.
Yeah. So, and then so this film was a lot of was an homage to those first 13 episodes and some of the sort of weird style that went into making it, because it was a super low budget show. They did a lot of found a lot of creativity in weird angles and shit. I saw this thing where they were talking about the old TV show. They would do reverse footage. So to make it look like a guy was jumping into a tree, you'd just be let go of a tree and play it backwards. Yeah. Or they had guys backwards somersault down a hill, played it backwards. So then it looked like they were forward somersaulting up a hill, and it looks creepy as hell. So there's so much of that in this movie that I really appreciate. Like these deliberate angles they wouldn't have to use in 2023, but they do anyway.
Yeah, particularly the Power Ranger flip that I think we're all familiar with, like the camera looking up into the sky and just like whip, 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 whip.
Reminded me of a conversation I had with my brother recently talking about the new Ninja Turtles movie and how it's a fully CG movie, the new Ninja Turtles flick, but it's deliberately made to look old, or not old, but hand drawn, right?
Yeah.
And my brother just whips this out. Kudos to Andrew for just having this quote in his back pocket. But it's from Brian Eno, a music producer, that I was really apt when we were talking about Turtles, and kind of applies here, at least to the approach that they took in making this film. Quote goes, whatever you now find weird, ugly, uncomfortable, and nasty about a new medium will surely become its signature. CD distortion, the jitteriness of digital video, the crap sound of 8-bit, all of these will be cherished and emulated as soon as they can be avoided. Which I thought was, he goes on to more, but that's the
it's like J.J. Abrams adding lens flare to all of his movies.
Yeah.
So, modern cameras don't do that. They're designed to not provide lens flare. You have to digitally add that in.
Yeah. So this whole movie is an homage to cheap 70s Japanese television in a way that's very endearing. So
it's 1,000%
end of the history
endearing.
lesson, but I've been excited to share this all week.
It reminds me of all the pixel art games too, right? Like theoretically, that level of art should have been abandoned, but nope.
Yeah, this movie is definitely 1,000% endearing, though. It kind of confused me for the first 10 minutes of the movie, because it starts with a cold open and you know absolutely nothing what's going on, and then it very quickly, the style, the look, it all kind of if you're familiar with that kind of genre and those genre tropes, it becomes very comfortable, and you just kind of sink into your chair and a smile crosses your face and you're just like, I'm here for this. I'm here for this.
Yeah, that is where I was the most frustrated, and because it's particularly the first 5 to 10 minutes is an absolute masterclass in tell don't show. It's just you're just getting exposition barfed at you, and you're like, what's happening? And even just like the way that all the characters are introduced are like is fairly confusing. Like, I'm sure like if you know who Kamen Rider is and stuff like that, like you're just like immediately like in touch with who are the major players. But like, yeah, there's no help for someone not familiar with the property.
Yeah, for sure. Liam was right when he said it kind of makes some assumptions about your base level of understanding about Kamen Rider. And if you don't have that, it's certainly the first like little bit of the movie is very confusing.
The first half, and I think I like what Greg said a minute ago about how when Ruriko dies and gets uploaded into the helmet, it's the first time there's any real stakes. And I think you're correct, and it kind of creates, at least for me, this sort of like high, low, high again journey where like I didn't mind that jumping into it. I had no idea what any of this was, because even though you don't have the context, you're getting exposition very quickly, and everyone's wearing their whole deal on their sleeve. Like, it's really odd. He's a spider guy fighting a grasshopper guy. Like, what more do you need to know? And then it kind of, and I was kind of charmed. I'm like, it's fun that none of this really matters. And then an hour in, I'm like, none of this really matters actually. And I'm kind of a little bit bored. And then we hit that part where Ruriko dies. The stakes are legitimate, and it's a pretty fun last act. So
yeah, it finds a way of keeping you engaged, even if it's not necessarily on a story level. Like, there's lots of like you mentioned earlier, like lots of fun camera angles and cinematography. And there's some really interesting methods for filming the action that was really unique. And I guess I believe that came from the original show. There's that scene where like Kamen Rider is surrounded by a whole bunch of enemies, and it's sort of like doing this sort of jump cut thing where everyone looks like they're sort of like they're almost like stop motion animation with live people
straight out of there.
Yeah, so that came from the original show, but it was really interesting and engaging to watch, because I was like, oh, what is going on here? This is really interesting.
Yeah, it's tough though too with not just movies that are references or reference things that you may or may not be familiar with. Even just watching international films, it's something that I struggled with. I watched a very challenging film recently called Neptune Frost. It's an African film. I forget specifically what part, because I didn't have it up in front of me for notes. But it's also like this like beat poetry based Afro-future sci-fi musical in another language from Africa. And I was watching it, and I couldn't parse whether big creative choices were one of three things. And I kind of ran into this with this movie too. Are these deliberate creative choices by the filmmaker that are just part of any filmmaker's, like, I wanted to do it this way for these reasons, I'm a filmmaker? Were they not deliberate, like mistakes, oversights, things that weren't considered? Or are they cultural norms that I'm just not familiar with? And it wasn't a deliberate or not deliberate choice by the filmmaker. It's just something that they do in that part of the world. And I can, with the weirder the international movie, the harder it is to tell if it's which one of those three things it is. And yeah, stuff like that jump cutty thing. It's like, like, where did that come from?
There's really kind of like, I think, particularly with cultures that are less similar to our own, watching their movies, there's you need to watch a chunk of them to really get like comfortable with the cinematic language, right? And just like once you start getting more comfortable with that, and as well as the the cultural touchstones and things like that, then I think you can start appreciating what it's dishing out a whole lot more. That certainly happened for me with anime, like when I was younger and watched a lot of it.
So yeah, it seems like we were all fairly positive on Kamen Rider, or at least appreciated the unique experience, but it is also not a film without its faults, and we did get a story, we did get narrative beats, we did get choices, and we have some notes, so we will discuss those shortly.
I'd like to get more reading done, and joining a book club seems like a good idea, but I don't know.
why not?
Reading a whole book in a month, that's pretty daunting.
What if it was just a chapter, say a week?
That doesn't sound too bad. Still, getting together with a bunch of people, that's a whole evening.
Well, what if it was only half an hour, whenever you wanted to?
That would be great.
The Read Along, a mini book club for your ears.
Join my wife Anita
and my husband Scott
as we take you on a journey through a good book,
one chapter at a time. Available right now on your podcatcher of choice.
We're back. We're talking Shin Kamen Rider. What do you guys have for notes for this film?
I believe that I should go first simply because my notes are only about the first 5 minutes. So if you'll indulge me again, we start with a low angle dolly in on a mostly empty road. In the distance, there are 2 cars crashed together and on fire. As we get closer, we see like a man's body on the ground in front of the cars, and the camera slows down, moving up over top of the body, and then it's a man struggling to say something, but he can't get it out. And finally, he says, "Takeshi, are they okay? Are they okay?" Then the sound kind of muffles, and we get a transition to Takeshi in a medical enclosure, and we hear like these hisses and pops around him as the enclosure opens, and then the muffled sounds fade, and we hear Ruiko say, "Are you okay? Can you walk?" And Takeshi steps out of the enclosure, and then takes a couple steps and falls. And in a long shot, we see Ryuko visibly annoyed, grabbing Takeshi and dragging him across the floor and telling him, "Come on, we don't have much time." So we cut to another low angle shot of the road, but this time off in the distance, we can just make out a red and white motorcycle. And suddenly large armored vehicles appear from behind them or along the horizon line. We cut to the bike, and it's Ruriko speeding away with Takeshi passed out on her back. The armored vehicles open, and all like the spider henchmen attack, and they do all those cool things like they did in the movie proper, where they're doing spider webs against bridges and things like that, and it was really neat. Ruriko, distressed, is like whipping and turning to avoid them and barely maintaining control of the bike. She screams like, "Wake up, you idiot!" and a few times before losing control of the bike, and it starts careening off a cliff. Just as they're about to go off the edge, Takeshi wakes up and instinctively grabs Ruriko and protecting her as they fall. They smash into the ground, the bike falls beside them, and the Kamen Rider helmet rolls right in front of Ruriko's eyes. She struggles to get up, hands the helmet to Takeshi with some urgency, and just like, "Put this on." The spider henchmen surround them and hold still while the spider rog makes his big entrance. He lets out like a laugh, because the laughs are supposedly a big touchstone of the villains in the Kamen Rider. Yeah. And claims that there's no escape for traitors. The henchmen move in on Riko, and Takeshi tries to help her, but is easily repelled by the henchmen. And then she screams at him again, like, "Put on the helmet." Takeshi looks at the helmet, puts it on, and seems to like immediately lose control of himself. And then he like brutally attacks and kills the henchman, and just henchman after henchman dying and big blood fueled, just like they are in the movie. And then he also brutally beats the Spyrog with his bare fist until he's just like a pile of mush. Mm-hmm. Takeshi stands up and the helmet comes off, and he looks like, some kind of grasshopper alien. He looks down at his like insect's arms. And he's like, "What happened to me?" And then he passes out. So importantly, like there's no hero moment here. So we want to make sure that like we don't just blow our hero wad in the first 5 minutes.
Sure. Yeah. Because a lot of that's pretty true to what happens. I was trying to figure out what the difference was, but yeah, it's that he doesn't get this like rah moment.
But also like what I'm trying to do with the way that I've set things up here is I'm trying to use like film language to set certain things up rather than having the characters spell things out loud. Because if we get a scene of Ruiku in the Shocker's headquarters, then we instinctively know that, you know, she's some kind of rebel. We know that Takeshi is important for some reason, because she is trying to escape with him and she's dragging him out. You know, like just doing a lot of like shorthand just so like me as the audience viewer just has a quick understanding of like what's happening rather than just seeing two people on a bike who I've never met and don't understand the context of anything. Plus, I just kind of think it's like it would just be yeah, and I think it'd just be. I also wanted to set up Takeshi's dad very early on, so the stuff I mentioned off the top, like that, there's like a car crash and then there's a guy the camera pulls up to and he says, "Are they okay?" Like that in my mind, like that's his dad, and he doesn't necessarily need to be a cop. In my mind, like later on, it will be revealed that like he kind of like used his car to stop another car from hitting someone on the road. Like we'll get like a pull out and see like the whole scene of the accident where he basically saved someone's life and he was doing it all sort of selflessly. So that way, the reason I like doing that on the road is because I liked having like Takeshi's big thing being on the road with his bike and what happened to his dad being on the road as well. So you can sort of like marry those two scenes together.
Yeah.
And would this be instead of all those flashbacks?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm sure you'd probably still have to, like, you'd have to have one more flashback to sort of like completely pull out what actually happened, but at least you get a sense.
That's the whole deal with the flashbacks is they pull out farther and farther as it goes, right?
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah.
Like the first one is just him bloody, are they okay? The second one, it's very clear there's been a car accident. Mm-hmm. And then in the third one, you finally get like the shot of his dad steering into a car to save like a school bus or something. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. I like, one of the things that I like about the movie is that it's never stated, but it's strongly implied that Shocker's augments treatment actually creates sociopaths. Like, because Shocker's trying to create happiness in the fewest number of people, the people who get this augmentation, their happiness, that like it increases their violent tendencies, it reduces their inhibitions, like their morals and ethics go out the window, and regular people turn into monsters. They turn into sociopaths. And Takeshi's real superpower is his heart. Like because he's been given the same augment stuff, but his inherent selfless nature gives him the power to pull back so that he doesn't go as far as all the other augments do. He doesn't become a sociopath. And I think that needs to remain the core of his character, no matter what version we're doing. Like that his actual superpower is not his grasshopper powers. It's that he's got a kind heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which came from his dad. So I do really like that. I want to make this movie more focused. You need a lot less going on. And I think that there's a great plot arc to start with the Wasp. And I think that she's our first movie villain. And you tease more Shocker stuff, and you tease Ruriko's brother for a future film with Butterfly Og and Kamen Rider 2. You save those for like a tease at the end of this movie to go into the next one. But I think you have an entire movie with just Wasp, because she's got the built-in background with Ruriko. You can give her Spider Og and I think Scorpion Og, who's very underused in this movie.
That was very funny how they fridge.
But I think that you use Scorpion Og specifically. You elevate her to make the bullet that kills Wasp Og more impactful and more meaningful. And you have those two running as her henchmen. And so like the first two acts of the movie are them shaking Spider Og, who's after them right after the escape. And then the big bad, the person who's like enslaving people, sending Scorpion Og, her heavy, after them. And then they have to take down Scorpion Og with the help of the government, who they get recruited by at that point. and because they've shown that they can take out Spider-Og, these guys must be good. The government contacts them. Hey, we're trying to take out Shocker too. And spoiler alert, Shocker's sending another person after you. They're sending Scorpion-Og after you, and she's bad news. And they take out Scorpion-Og, and then it's the reveal that Ruriko at that point figures out that the person who's been running Spider-Og and Scorpion-Og is Wasp-Og. And that leads into your third act big fight with Wasp, who's trying to create a hive out of everybody. Because if in a perfectly ordered society with her at the top, everyone is content. There's happiness. And that's what Shocker's all about.
It reinforces the hive mind reinforces the happiness theme too.
Yeah. And I think there's your plot. There's your movie. You've got your act 1 mini boss, your act 2 mini boss, your big boss. You've got a whole thing, and then you tease that there's more Shocker stuff coming down the pipe, and it's Ruriko's brother, and he's built his own grasshopper Og. So you've got Kamen Rider too, and there's like everybody's hot for another movie now.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then I was gonna be like, but this movie's at breakneck speed. So many action scenes, so much happens. But any of the parts that we cut out, if we lose the bat, if we lose the chameleon, you can also replace with the fact that Wasp-Og has a brainless army. So you could also have Kamen Rider like not punching regular people who are just under her spell.
And Spider-Og still has his like spider cops, and Scorpion-Og still has her like femme fatales. And so there can be other action beats, because in an episode of Power Rangers, you have the monster of the week, but the monster of the week has his putties, and they have to go through the putties before they get to the monster of the week. And I think that's your acts, is like 3 episodes of this show, right?
I also like that you make much more of a meal out of the fact that they use Scorpion-Og's scorpion venom to kill Wasp-Og.
Yeah.
That's almost treated like a joke, because they make a big to-do about, Scorpion-Og coming out and showing off, and then she just gets ganked by G-Man.
Like off camera. Yeah.
Almost off. Like, he's almost off camera is more merciful. It's like you get to see someone get killed off camera on camera. And it's like it's kind of played for a laugh. And then, if it was like literally playing the two against them, like we can beat the one with the other. Yeah. Like,
and this is one of the reasons why I'm not using Bat-Og in my version, even though he's kind of the second boss in the film as it is because I like tying in Scorpion-Og. I like the ending with Wasp, that Kamen Rider and Ruriko are, because they're both good people, are still trying to reach out to what's left of her humanity, and they can't bring themselves to kill her. And so the G-Men swoop in and do it, and they do it using like a golden bullet. They have the golden gun because they used Scorpion-Og's venom, which is the one thing that definitely can kill an Og.
Another nice setup for another movie of like, okay, well, we thought we were in cahoots with these very compassionate G-Men, and actually they're questionable.
Yeah,
we have to get her brother, but can we trust the G-Men?
Yeah.
Episode 2. Yeah.
And there's a little bit to mix into the second movie too. Yeah. That's fair. I like it.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it would smooth out some of the pace and make less. There's a lot of stakeless action, and I think yours cuts that down a lot. There's just part of me that does love like a Scott Pilgrim style, like slaughter of multiple people whose whole deal you can tell just by looking at them. But I realize that's more of my like dirty little kink and not really a viable way to make a movie. I love a massacre of people who you can tell what their deal is. Like I've been watching a lot of Venture Brothers, and there's a lot of that in Venture Brothers. So
that's fair.
I think yours is definitely a smoother movie, especially if it starts with what Greg says, and you just get more Spider-Og. Like, he dies like a punk in the beginning. Like,
he's dead like 10 minutes in. I had texted, Spider-Og's kind of cool, and he immediately died after I texted that to these guys.
So, okay, one of my notes is moot if we do it Scott's way, but I had some feedback on Bat-Og. I had a really hard time with Bat-Og.
Well, we can save Bat-Og for a future movie, so by all means, pitch it.
Okay, great. Then in whatever movie Bat-Og shows up in, I don't know if you guys felt this. When they go to meet him, he's in an outdoor lecture hall. So he's a bat guy. He's like Man-Bat from Batman. He's in an outdoor lecture hall on a sunny afternoon. and they fight this bat, and so much of this movie looks slick as hell. Like, the costumes are all great. The production design, so much love went into it, updating it, but keeping it true, nods to the original, something original. But Bat-Og looks kind of silly. The makeup looks great. His face looks great. Yeah. Him flying around with wings for arms in a suit in broad daylight, giving his evil monologue while flapping around the screen like a bat does, like frenetically and really bouncing from corner to corner, while monologuing, looked ridiculous. And it made me think about Morbius. One of our critiques of Morbius was the ending fight with him. It was a black, muddy mess. It was just a bunch of gray-black CGI garbage, and you couldn't tell what was going on. Whereas this, it was very unflatteringly lit. You could see clear as day this guy looked ridiculous. So I'm like, there is a scale for Bat Guy fighting. Like, a sliding darkness-lightness scale, and the middle is Matt Reeves' Batman.
Yep.
But, like, too dark, Morbius. Too light, Bat-Og. It's, like... So if we saw Bat-Og, he should be in a dark place, not during the day.
Or at least, a darker place with more flattering light. Yeah, for sure.
It was very jarring. It looked very bad. And it's not a cheap movie. Like, it's not a cheaply made movie. All the effects are really well done. All the costumes, a lot went into them. But, like, they found the absolute upper limit of the uncanny valley. You just can't make a guy in a white tuxedo, but bat arms, flapping around dead center in the frame, look good.
Yeah.
Full stop. So, that's my note for Bat-Og. I also kind of wanted, especially because it's such a motorcycle-based story, I didn't appreciate that. Like, I don't care that they go from place to place fighting a million guys, but there was zero sense of geography, which isn't even necessarily a bad thing, but your guy rides a motorcycle. Like, the road is part of his deal. The road to get to bad guys should be relevant. And in fact, maybe even more of the fight should have been on roads.
What better way to fight the minions on your way to go fight the mini-boss than, motorcycling down the road with, like, Spider-Og's spider cops in their trucks going after him. You could have Scorpion-Og's, like, femme fatales can all have, like, souped-up scorpion cars. And, like, then you're kind of remixing in that chase scene action that's kind of missing from a movie of a guy who rides a motorcycle.
Yeah, there's surprisingly not a lot of chases.
Yeah, missed opportunity that the two Kamen Riders don't have a chase scene together, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, the most chase scene in this movie is in a dark tunnel when he's being chased by the locust swarm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Though I will say most of the villain lairs, I don't know if you noticed, they're all very open concept, like very wide. That is an homage to the show thing. The show is basically shot in nondescript Japanese roads, giant, barely decorated sound stages.
I'm fine with it.
They worked that even nicely to Butterfly Og's lair.
Yeah. Even Wasp's lair.
Wasp's lair, yeah. There.
Yeah. Of any of the issues of I had with the movie, the production design was not one of them.
That's fair. But yeah, I wanted a sense of place and a feeling of being on the road on a motorcycle. Mm-hmm. Some of that, like, transient hero vibe. Your littlest hobos, And then I just have more of a question for you guys. Maybe our listeners can answer in the Discord or on X. My note is this thread should go somewhere. What was the deal with the robot in the burgundy suit or the purple suit?
You're talking about K?
K, yeah. He seems to be talking to, like, a giant AI interface wall at one point. The head of Shocker, I think. Then at one point he's talking to Roriko, which makes sense. She worked at Shocker. I think he just kind of, like, shows up periodically throughout the movie.
Well,
and then we never see the AI Wally was talking to early on, or him in a meaningful way ever again, to the point where I was concerned I had missed something. And before our recording, needed you both to reassure me I had not, like, misunderstood.
So his role in the film is because his whole deal is that he was designed to observe humanity, so that I, the big AI interface, could better understand what would make humanity happy. And so he's like the right-hand man of I, but his whole deal is that he's just Uatu the Watcher.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's just around keeping an eye on things. And that's why he's a non-combatant. He's just there in the background, showing that Shocker's constantly watching. Which I kind of like, actually. I kind of enjoyed his deal because it added a little bit of mystique and mystery. And the fact that he was so cordial with Ruroco as well. For the record, though, earlier on, I think he was talking to Butterfly Og while Butterfly Og was still in his cocoon. That was unclear, but that's what I think it was.
I guess then I would just love to see some of the point of that guy and the things he does and says cleared up.
Fair enough.
Just a little... for all of the exposition dumping we save in Greg's version, I would like a little bit of the exposition, please, for his whole steez. We'll take some of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I had a kind of a chuckle while I was watching the scene with I, because reading subtitles and having a character named I was confusing at times.
Also, I appreciated that the fully robotic characters are I, J, and K. Because K is an upgrade from J, and J was designed as the world interface to watch things for I. I thought that was kind of a fun little thing.
Indeed.
There's fun little bits. There's fun little bits throughout.
It is overall a fun movie. It is
sure.
worth a watch, and yeah, if you enjoy sort of brainless superhero action, it's worth it. Like I said, it really, for better or for worse, there are huge chunks of it where it doesn't matter if you get it or not, because everyone is broadcasting their whole deal on their sleeves in a way that I really felt like I got to have the experience. By watching this movie, I got to have the experience of someone who knows nothing about Marvel movies watching a Marvel movie for the first time. Like, if you had no idea what any of this stuff, like, Superman and that Batman, that's it. And you're like, Marvel, never heard of them.
And then you watch, specifically you watch Avengers.
Avengers, or even like, think Civil War, where you're like, okay, there's a cat guy, but he's doing cat guy stuff, so I guess that checks out. There's a spider guy, does spider guy stuff, sure. Ant guy got bigger, feel like he should have got smaller, but I'll buy it, okay, sure. It's like, it looks cool. I don't know why they're fighting each other, but it looks cool as hell. That's what this feels like. This feels like watching a Marvel movie after a mind wipe. So if that's your jam, get into it. It's on Prime. And some of our listeners watched as well. Thank you to everyone who commented on our various social medias. Again, our link tree on our website, ihaveSomeNotes.com. You can get in touch with us one way or another, especially the Discord. Come find us on the Discord. We're having a good time over there. Listener Tack says, I have 2 fixes. Give me at least 3 minutes of pre-transformed protagonist so I can get my bearings. Just something to lighten the backstory exposition. So.
Yeah, that's kind of what Greg's deal was too. I like Greg's version where we don't really get to see him pre-transformation. We just kind of like cold open with him being transformed. But I could buy seeing a dude on a motorcycle get into like a car crash, and then like shadowy paramedics show up and then whisk him away to a secret facility. Like I could buy that too.
Also, I just found, maybe I should put this in my notes. This had the same problem I had with Spider-Man 3, like the Raimi one. For a movie that's all about his powers come from the mask and the belt, this guy loves to take his mask off. Like his name is Masked Rider, and he is not wearing his mask half the time.
Because he's very handsome.
Yeah, so again, I think back to Dredd.
Yeah, it's the old issue with, especially when your mask covers your mouth, is that it's very difficult for the actor to emote. And if you have any sort of dramatic scene, that's essentially why almost every Spider-Man movie does that. I mean, they just end up removing the mask at some point just because we need to see the actor's face.
Falling back into the tropes of the genre, though, that's the reason why all of the characters do such physical actions and are constant, like big nods and big shakes of their heads, moving their arms all over the place, striking poses. That's part of them using their whole physicality to emote because they're wearing like entire face concealing helmets. And it's corny and it's very campy, but that is the logic behind it is like, I can't use my face, so I'm going to use my whole body to express that I am in pain or that I am sad or that I am excited or that we need to go and fight that guy. Like that's why that's there.
And they committed to the conventions of that, you know, the limitations of 70s television. They committed to it in so many other ways. I don't know why they couldn't commit to the mask thing. Like, yeah. Tack continues. Now this is a bit extreme, but add an English dub. That's right. Come at me, otakus. Look, some foreign language films wouldn't work well with dubbing, but this movie benefits from more passive viewing and not staring at the bottom 2 inches of the screen. Sadly, I only watched 20 minutes. I like the cut of this movie's jib, but it just isn't my flavor of schlock. Give me Shin Batman 66 and I'll be there with a bowl of cereal. Give me Shin 1950 Space Adventure, Shin Detective Noir, Shin Universal Monster, Shin Godzilla. Oh, wait.
Yeah. Tack, push through those first 20 minutes. I promise you're in for a roller coaster ride. I get where he's coming from. And, like, yeah, because the movie's so action-packed and so dense, it would benefit from an easier viewing and not having to constantly be reading the subtitle. I kind of agree with that. There's a mechanical reason why that works for me. Even though I'm very much a person who's like, I like subtitles, I have no problem with that. I can see the benefit of it here. I can see why that would be helpful to a casual viewer.
It's funny he came to the same conclusion of Shin Batman 66, because watching this being like, oh, this is like a big love letter to some 70s TV show these nerds love. I was like, I want the next Batman movie to be an Adam West style Batman movie. But also I think I said this in our Birds of Prey episode. Birds of Prey is kind of that. If you want to see the closest thing we're going to get to a modern Batman 66, Birds of Prey.
Sure. I disagree entirely. Batman and Robin.
Sure, that too. Yeah. I mean, Lego Batman's even got it, but...
Yeah, but because say what you will about Joel Schumacher, and a lot of people have said many things about him, he was deliberately trying to ape the campy style of the 60s Batman movies. And the movies might not be great, but like visually and tonally, that he was nailing that.
Yeah.
The other one it made me think of was I kind of want a Bond movie that's set in the 60s. Like, maybe even with a guy kind of doing like a light Connery. Could be fun. But then I realized they made that movie. It's called The Man from U.N.C.L.E. So then I changed my mind. I want an 80s Bond movie in 2023.
There's also OSS 117, Cairo Nest of Spies from 2006. It's a French film, but it is done exactly in the style of like the 60s Bond movies, down to the film grain. But it is a satire of those movies with a character who inhabits all of Bond's worst traits. Like he's a chauvinist. He's
I want an earnest. I want it. I don't want Get Smart. We've got Get Smart already. I want like an earnest thing. And that is kind of, like I said, what Man from U.N.C.L.E. is. So that's why, I want an 80s Bond movie pastiche in 2023.
Fair enough.
That kind of campy PG era of Bond. So,
yeah. Just quickly on the Bond thing, I just wanted to add that, like, because that genre is so
heavily parodied,
heavily parodied, and like and so many other directors have taken inspiration. Directors and writers taking inspiration from Bond. That, like, I feel for anyone who is tasked with trying to write a new one, because all of the avenues that you would sort of like try and deke to is like, how do we refresh this character? Like, a lot of it's already been done just by virtue of all these different parodies and satires being already made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weirdly, one of the Shin Kamen Rider YouTube videos I watched, director Anno had to ask himself the same thing about Shin Kamen Rider, because it has also been made a million times. He's like, how can I do something new? And his approach was like to hyper focus on that first 13 episodes of what is a like 1,000 episode multi-series Doctor Who-esque sprawling franchise.
Up to and including multiple Kamen Riders taking over the mantle, yeah.
Dorja Sprungfeld says... What is it?
Dorju
Sprungfeld. I mean, obviously... Maybe I was about to say, obviously this is a fake Twitter name, but maybe it's not.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't assume that.
No, it's a fake name, sort of.
Okay, good. Then I don't care that I mispronounced it. I think I'm too old for this, son. I was a tier 2 anime fan back in high school, Kevin Lowe reference, but was too old for Power Rangers craze that's fueling the whole tokusatsu nostalgia thing. It just came off as corny and low budget to me, resumes yelling at clouds. Definitely not low budget, yes, corny.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same, I think, age bracket, in that Power Rangers came in just a little too late for me to super get into it, but I was definitely familiar with it enough that I had things to say during our Power Rangers episode way back when. But yeah, I wasn't a hyper fan of it, but I still absorbed enough of it through other friends who were into it from the pop culture that I'm familiar with the tropes. And so I was able to just follow what was going on here just based on the tropes alone.
And you are, I'm going to mansplain this to you, Scott, sorry, but you are familiar that Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers as we know it, is like a hybrid of two shows, right? Like they filmed new footage. Okay. Not everybody knows that. And I only bring this up because in my digging, I found a YouTube guy who went deep on Masked Rider, the 90s US attempt to do the same thing to all the old episodes of Kamen Rider that they did to the old episodes of Super Sentai or Sentai. Yeah. Which is take these masked superhero fighting shows from Japan that are 20 years old and intercut it with new footage of American kids in a high school and make a whole new show out of it. They tried to do that with Kamen Rider and it's a nightmare to the point where one of the reasons Kamen Rider never made it out of Japan is, Toei Company was like, we're never letting Americans touch Kamen Rider ever again.
Kamen Rider is too sacred to let the Americans get their sticky fingers.
And the one time they got it, they botched it hard. So there's not enough. Their plan was a sitcom, family sitcom, like mom, dad, kids, and a wacky alien that was a little duck costume.
You can't see the face I'm making right now, but it's not a good one.
Played by Vern Troyer, apparently. A pretty good animatronic, furry duck alien, where then also every, once per commercial break, Kamen Rider would show up and super kick the shit out of someone on a highway, and then they would go back to this family.
Who have nothing to do with Kamen Rider? They're just
almost
around.
Nothing to do with Kamen Rider.
They're just around, and Kamen Rider shows up and beats an alien while they were
and they had to do way more with the stupid family thing because there's 1 million episodes of Super Sentai, but there wasn't as much content available from Kamen Rider, and some of it was super violent. So then there's even less to do. So they padded out even more with the fuzzy duck. I'll share the video. It's great.
Going back to just one thing that Deja mentioned, I think it's interesting that this is a high budget movie that's trying to look like a low budget movie.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of the fun charm of it.
So that was all of our comments for Shin Kamen Rider. I do recommend checking it out. Like I said, it's on Prime. But we also, because we're trying new things with the new season, obviously not talking about struck work, except for when I bring up the Ninja Turtles by accident. We're also just looking for ways to engage with you about different aspects, and so we asked those of us on our social medias your favorite movie from the noble nation of Japan that you've seen recently. We got lots of response for that as well, and it's always just fun to talk about movies with Scott, with Greg, with you guys. So let's get into that too. Andrew Craig says, Gijora 1954 is the beginning of a new genre, the kaiju film. I love the original and so many of the films that came after. They often played on TV in afternoons and weekends when I was a kid, and I never missed a chance to watch.
Yeah, the classics. Some of them are pretty silly, but you know what? It's all glorious. It's fantastic. All the kaiju films are great.
I don't know if they are anymore, but at one point they were all on Crave, all of them. Deja Springfield, aka Dorju Sprungfeld, says, I realized who that was when she said earlier. Oh my god, it's Deja. Okay. Have you guys seen Bad City? I don't know that it's my favorite Japanese film, but the fight scenes are crazy. Capital crazy. You know how in a lot of Hollywood action movies, a lot of fight scenes have zero tension? They never really feel dangerous, even though there are dudes flipping out with incredibly deadly superpowers or laser swords or whatever. They're so intensely choreographed that it feels like you're watching people dancing, not fighting for their lives. Well, Bad City's fight scenes feel largely unchoreographed brawls, like you're watching a couple of people legitimately fight for their lives. Anyway, check out Shoplifters sometime. It's probably my favorite Japanese film of the past 20 years.
Yeah, I've heard about Shoplifters. I have not yet seen it, but I've been told it's fantastic.
Is it a recent film?
Yeah. It's, I want to say it's within the last 5 years. I'm talking out of my...
2018. I was sure
yeah.
might have heard my mouse clicking and stuff. Yeah, 2018.
Speaking of like fight scenes that feel like quite more like brawls or more visceral, you've ever noticed that like if you're watching a film that's trying to take like the violence really seriously, there's a big change in the sound effect of like how a punch like might land. Like obviously a lot of martial arts films have that kind of like high pitched like kind of thing, right? But like if it's a serious drama, if you're watching something like History of Violence, it's just this really meaty, muted, just thud, and it feels so much like, oh no, this is awful.
Herman from Modern Manhood says, my favorite have been the horror action Takeshita Miike movies, Ichi the Killer, Audition, and 13 Assassins. Honorable mentions to Battle Royale. Of course, we can't forget amazing anime movies like Spirited Away and Akira.
Yeah, Spirited Away and Akira, both. Basically anything by Hayao Miyazaki is pretty fantastic. He so nails childlike wonder. Like being a kid in a fantastical environment or in a fantastical place. Like those movies absolutely nail it, and I cannot recommend any of them enough. Anything by Hayao Miyazaki. So we're talking like My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle. Just find one and watch it and just fall in love. It's fantastic.
Robin Taylor says, I'm watching Gatchaman because I loved G-Force as a kid. That would make a killer live-action movie.
Yeah, probably.
Siri, Google Gatchaman.
Going back to Akira, like speaking of Americans getting their hands on things, how many times have we heard that they're making an Akira movie in the United States and just like
and it never comes
never comes to fruition.
Don't.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
That's like it's like remaking Citizen Kane. Why?
Yeah,
it's been done, and you're not going to do any better or any different.
I mean, and even like the best case scenario, you get the Netflix Cowboy Bebop show. Like that's the best case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am a big fan. If we're going to talk about Japanese movies, I love a samurai tragedy. I love them to pieces. It is an entire genre of films that I nom. I can't get enough of them. Basically anything by Akira Kurosawa, not to sound pretentious, but he really was a fantastic director in a time when he was taking all of the Western genres tropes and just slapping them onto samurai movies. And they're all fantastic from your Seven Samurai through your Yojimbo movies. Like it's all good. He worked a lot with Toshiro Mifune, who is like an all-time actor, like absolutely fantastic in everything he appears in. So you can also just seek out Mifune movies. They're fantastic. Yeah. And Herman mentioned 13 Assassins, and that's right in my sweet spot. That's another samurai tragedy. I absolutely love it. So those are all definitely the kind of Japanese movies that I just can't get enough of.
Greg, you wanna?
My current favorite Japanese film is something I watched recently, was Drive My Car, which is just an excellent relationship drama that has this really interesting sort of play within a play type thing going on for it, and I couldn't recommend it enough. In my teens, I was watching lots of anime, and I was particularly engaged with the little comedy series, like things like Ranma One Half and El Hazard, Tenchi Moyu, Oh My Goddess. So those kinds of
literally every anime series I was watching at that time, Greg.
Yeah. Probably we were probably in the same dub rings, I bet.
Probably, because that was... Look, when Animathon started in Edmonton, for those of you who aren't familiar, Animathon is the big yearly anime festival in Edmonton. It's gotten quite big. It's a big to-do now. But back in the day, it was literally just an opportunity for the nerds to get together and watch each other's tapes. Like, that was literally what it was, because you had to circulate the tapes. That was the only way to get your hands on some of this stuff.
It was just a bunch of pull-out tables in Grant MacEwan. Just like in the hallway of a college, just people trying to sell their wares, and it was quite the dirty, grungy affair back then.
I guess I'll just leave off with Shin Godzilla rules. I had a lot of fun with Shin Kamen Rider. I am going to go look up Shin Ultraman. Ultraman and Kamen Rider have always kind of been like different but associated, like very like Batman Superman or like Batman 66 and the Green Hornet kind of vibes.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a 2016 Shin Godzilla, 2019 Shin Ultraman, 2023 Shin Kamen Rider. I want to catch Shin Ultraman. So it's not streaming in Canada. I'll figure out somewhere to watch it, but I'm going to jump in on this new age of Japanese cultural reboots. I'm all in. Because Shin Godzilla rules.
It does. It's a very interesting and unique take on taking the Godzilla story and tropes and turning them into an entirely different kind of movie. And it's a great example of taking an existing property and doing something new with it. And it's very different from a regular Godzilla movie, and the regular Godzilla movies are fantastic, but it's so good just by itself.
Until then, you can follow us on Facebook.com/I have some notes, at I have some notes on Twitter or Blue Sky, at I have some notes pod on Instagram, or find a link at I have some notes.com for a link tree. That's where you get the Discord. That's where you get everything else. But whatever app you're on now, listening to this, why not subscribe, like, review, whatever that app wants you to do it for us, please.
Hey, we're also all on Letterboxd. I thought of that because we were talking about our favorite Japanese movies. I have a whole list of 100 samurai movies you could check out if you follow me on Letterboxd, and I know Greg and Liam are both there. You might consider doing that as well, because we're all movie nerds. You should also definitely head over to our Patreon so that you can continue to give us a little bit of financial support, because that helps keep the lights on around here, and we'd love to talk about movies with you more. So please do that.
Yeah. And keep an eye on all those socials for what's coming up next on I Have Some Notes, and for your opportunity to participate like all our awesome listeners did in this episode. So we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Until then, I'm Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver. Keep watching the skies.